On our last episode of the series, we toured the visitor center for the museum at Monticello that detailed the plans for building the house of the plantation of Thomas Jefferson. I'm the NYC Traveler, and we will see the building of the house and touring the first floor. After the years of planning, and Jefferson being in Paris, where he got more inspiration, it was time to build, or rather remodel, the plans that he had for the first Monticello. Jefferson was vice president and later president of the United States at this time, so he was away for most of the construction, as much as 9 months out of the year. He corresponded with his foremen, the overseers, and his son-in-law, his daughter Martha's husband, Thomas Randolph. Monticello was constructed by both free and enslaved laborers, approximately 69 persons. Everything was made from scratch. Trees cut down for the labor, red clay turned into bricks, and quarry and limestone for mortar and plaster. Many of the free laborers' names were listed in Jefferson's records, account books, and letters. But for most of the enslaved workers, their names were not. However, it is probable and possible that any enslaved person under Jefferson's ownership at that time were listed in either his records or with his wife's family. When they married, part of her dowry included the bulk of the enslaved labor that Monticello would have. The skilled laborers that were hired were assisted by the enslaved laborers, who in turn learned new skills and became experts themselves. These skills were used on the plantation afterwards and were passed down. Along with Jefferson's letters and records, excavations at Monticello shows archaeological evidence of how life was during this time, the tools that were used, and other information. So in this part of the exhibit are actual artifacts and representations of the materials and tools used by the construction crew. One of the most interesting facts is how some of the tools still look similar to what is used today. And of course, it is fun to see how much everything has changed and the machines we have now that construct houses. Like the planning part of the museum, this part of the exhibit is very detailed, and you can tour it before or after the house, or do both. It's fun to see how it came to be, and then to go and see the physical results. Now it's time to go up to the house itself. You can either walk it or take the shuttle. Before you head up, you can take a selfie with the old boy himself.
Author of the Declaration of Independence, third President of the United States, and founder of the University of Virginia. Monticello is a National Historic Landmark, the only presidential home in the United States designated as a United Nations World Heritage Site.
Main Street, 5,000-acre plantation. Over 400 enslaved people lived and labored at Monticello during Jefferson's lifetime. During your tour of the house, you'll spend about 40 minutes exploring the first floor of Thomas Jefferson's autobiographical masterpiece. Plan to spend time in the dependencies on the lower level, including the kitchen and wine cellar.
There's an area for you to wait for the tour guide so that you can go together in as a group. As you approach the house, stop and take a look at the outside. Note the rotunda, the dome at the top of the house, and the way the house extends on both sides. Also, before you leave the visitor center, check out to see what interesting activities that will be for children. Jefferson was a designer and a dreamer, but he was practical, and he used some faux techniques in constructing the house. Inside, you step into the grand hall. Jefferson meant for this area to be a museum of some artifacts that he either collected or was given. The green floor, that was the color on purpose, to be similar to the color of grass. There are antlers from the Lewis and Clark expedition. There are 2 timepieces that are worth noting. The clock was designed by Jefferson. As the clock moves throughout the day, there is a cord that slowly moves another part to indicate the day of the week. This was called the calendar clock. But it was too tall for this area, so the calendar continues into the basement through a hole in the floor. Jefferson was president when the United States acquired what would be mostly known as the Midwest and eventually 15 more states, the Louisiana Purchase. Lewis and Clark headed a team to explore the new area. They had help along the way, including a young indigenous teen, Sacagawea, the purchased wife of Toussaint Charbonneau. Not only did Lewis and Clark send back the antlers, they also sent back indigenous art and artifacts, although sadly, the Louisiana Purchase foreshadowed the displacement of that population. You'll notice that there's no grand staircase, like you see in many mansions. Jefferson thought it was a waste of space and preferred to use the staircases elsewhere. The family sitting room had various uses through the years. Before Jefferson got ill toward the end of his life, they used this room as an extension of his library and called it the book room. Since he had thousands of books, it was needed. Later, Martha, the daughter, used it as an office. She moved here with her husband, with their 11 out of 12 surviving children, when Dad retired in 1809. Martha, the daughter, served as First Lady in place of her late mother, when Jefferson was in office as president. Later, her husband Thomas Mann Randolph served as Virginia's governor, but she stayed more here at Monticello. The term sitting room came from the British. Later, here in America, we would say living room, although there are terms now like den and family room for areas for the family to relax, leaving the living room as a more formal area in some homes. A drawing room came from the term withdrawing room, where the family could withdraw or move to an area that was less formal for relaxing amongst themselves. The library was where Jefferson pursued his academic activities, reading and writing more than 19,000 letters, to say the least. Also in the library was some of his scientific instruments, including a tall clock in the corner that was extremely precise. He might have drawn up the plans for the University of Virginia here, which he founded. His most famous polygraph machine is also here, allowing Jefferson to make a copy of whatever he was writing at the same time, before carbon paper. However, he wrote his most famous document, the Declaration of Independence, in Philadelphia. There's a bust of John Adams, second president of the United States. Jefferson and Adams were friends until they fell out when Jefferson succeeded Adams as president. He thought that Adams appointed Jefferson's political enemies just before he left office in order to make Jefferson's presidency difficult. They made up later in life. Jefferson's bedroom was on this level. He had sent back letters and instructions about how to remodel the house so that his bedchamber would be here. It has an alcove bed, just barely his height. He was 6'2". He slept propped up, which he believed was healthier. The alcove was built during the remodeling. Note also the clothes horse to make the mornings go smoother. The house was sold after Jefferson died to settle debts and passed through some other owners. Evidence suggested this room was once wallpapered at some point. However, the paint here is similar to the color of a room that he stayed in when he was in Paris. In this era, most of the bedrooms would be upstairs in houses like this. But once again, Thomas was different. The storage area above the bed, the alcove bed itself, the accessibility to his beloved library, and just being on the first floor in the thick of the action shows that this was the result of his instructions and design when the house was remodeled. It is possible that Mrs. Jefferson died here also, although the account is written by her daughter Martha years later, who was 10 years old at the time. Also, the house was not laid out in the same exact way, so we are guessing in the rooms in her description. The parlor was a combo music salon, ballroom, family room, gaming room. Like the Grand Hall, this room has a museum quality with sculptures, medallions, music instruments, and objects displayed. There are paintings of Jefferson's idols here, Sirs John Locke, Isaac Newton, and Francis Bacon, along with Columbus, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and James Madison. The design of the floor was designed by Jefferson, and the mirrors that are in the room are original. They have never left it. There is a possibility that Jefferson was sitting here when he received a very breathless message that he was about to be captured by the British. He was Virginia's governor at the time in 1781, and he was alerted. Because of this, he and his family narrowly escaped the Britons. This room also has one of Jefferson's scientific instruments. There is a device by the window with a glass bulb and a crank with an air pump. It was used to experiment with air pressure and vacuums. Parties, weddings, social events, entertaining, it all happened here. At the Visitor Center Museum, you can play with a mechanism that demonstrates how the parlor doors open, designed also by Jefferson. The tea room was where Jefferson ate sometimes, read and wrote. More of his possessions were here, busts of Franklin, Washington, and John Paul Jones. The dining room seems small by Gilded Era standards and mansions in Europe, and there is no long table. Jefferson preferred a more intimate setting with small tables. Remember, his wife had died before the remodeling of Monticello, and his daughter was the hostess. He entertained here more with his family rather than he would have with his wife as a couple. Thomas used a system of dumbwaiters to serve. This was for more than one reason. It added to the informality of dining with the smaller tables, but it also eliminated the need for servants to be in the room at the same time. Guests could help themselves, and conversation could try to stay as private as it could be as possible on a plantation with 200 people. We're used to seeing dumbwaiters built into the wall that goes by pulleys and up and down, but one dumbwaiter was actually a revolving wall. The servants could put the items on it next door and push it to swing the shelves into the dining room. Even if the purpose wasn't to keep conversation private, it is still clever because this way, one person will be able to put onto all of those shelves what it would take more than one servant to bring in. The interesting yellow color on the walls is based on paint analysis while restoring Monticello. James Madison, 4th President of the United States, and his wife Dolly lived about 30 miles away, which was a day's journey, and they were frequent guests. They came so much the grandkids started calling this room Mr. Madison's room. This room and the tea room, which is directly across the house from it, are both octagon-shaped. For some reason, Jefferson liked octagons. Because the room was an octagon, in order to make the closet fit, it had to be triangular. There was also storage above the alcove bed, like in Jefferson's room. And like the sister room, the tea room, there is a terrace. On this side of the house is also a north square room, opposite the south square room, aka the sitting room. We didn't get to see that on this tour. We mentioned before that there was no grand staircase in the front part of the house. The staircases are in the back corner of the house. Jefferson thought that a grand staircase was a waste of space, and it is very evident in this narrow staircase. So, as we head to the second floor, we come to the end of the first floor. I'm the NYC Traveler, and we've been at the mansion at Monticello in Virginia.